Are you ready for a spine-chilling adventure? Before we delve into this dark and haunting tale, please take a moment to make sure you've subscribed to my channel and turned on notifications. You won't want to miss any part of this eerie series. Now, prepare for a story that will haunt your dreams. The crisp autumn air of October 2007 carried with it the scent of burning leaves and a subtle, unsettling chill. In the quiet, tree-lined suburbs of Portland, Oregon, a sense of tranquility was a cherished commodity, a stark contrast to the bustling city center. It was the kind of place where children rode bikes without fear, and neighbors left their doors unlocked, trusting in the communal embrace of their well-manicured streets. That peace was about to be shattered, irrevocably, by a shadow that had been silently growing in its midst. The first ripple of unease began with the disappearance of Sarah Jenkins, a 23-year-old art student. Sarah was vibrant, known for her flowing red hair and a laugh that could brighten even the gloomiest of days. She'd been last seen leaving a late-night study session at Portland State University, a short drive from her shared apartment in the Laurelhurst neighborhood. Her roommates, initially unconcerned, grew increasingly anxious as the hours bled into days. Sarah was meticulously responsible, and missing classes or failing to respond to calls was entirely out of character. Her beat-up Honda Civic remained parked outside her building, a silent testament to her sudden vanishing. Detective Miles Corbin, a man whose face bore the etched lines of too many sleepless nights and too many tragic cases, was assigned to Sarah's disappearance. Corbin was a Portland native, a grizzled veteran with a reputation for both a relentless pursuit of justice and a deep-seated empathy for the victims and their families. He'd seen the worst of humanity, yet still clung to a fierce belief in its inherent good. As he sat across from Sarah's distraught parents, their faces etched with a premature grief, he felt the familiar tightening in his gut. This wasn't a runaway. This felt different. The initial investigation was a flurry of activity, but yielded little. Friends and family were interviewed, her usual haunts checked, but no one had seen anything out of the ordinary. The police issued an Amber Alert, circulated her photo far and wide, but the vibrant image of Sarah's smile felt increasingly like a fading memory. The local news channels picked up the story, their reporters' voices solemn as they recounted the details, but still, no leads emerged. The collective anxiety of the community began to mount, a quiet hum beneath the surface of everyday life. Then, 3 weeks after Sarah vanished, the discovery was made. Not in Portland, but nearly an hour's drive east, in the desolate, heavily wooded expanse of the Mount Hood National Forest. A pair of hikers, venturing off a marked trail, stumbled upon a makeshift grave. The remote location, far from any discernible path, immediately set off alarm bells. The scene was meticulous, almost surgical in its concealment, yet tragically revealed. The remains were identified as Sarah Jenkins. The cause of death was a single, precise gunshot wound to the back of the head. There were no signs of sexual assault, no struggle. It was quick, clean, and terrifyingly efficient. The meticulous nature of the burial, however, suggested a killer who was not only careful but also disturbingly organized. Corbin felt a cold dread creep up his spine. This wasn't a random act of violence. This was premeditated, deliberate. The revelation sent shockwaves through Portland. The city, accustomed to its share of urban crime, was not prepared for this level of cold-blooded precision. The media frenzy intensified, painting Sarah as a symbol of lost innocence, a tragic figure snatched from the prime of her life. Public fear began to escalate, turning a previously trusting community wary and suspicious. Parents began to implement stricter curfews, neighbors eyed strangers with a newfound apprehension, and the once unlocked doors of Laurelhurst were now bolted tight. Corbin and his team delved deeper, but the forest offered few clues. No witnesses, no discarded items, no tire tracks in the damp earth. It was as if Sarah had simply been swallowed by the wilderness, leaving only the grim proof of her end. The only potential lead was a faint impression in the mud near the gravesite, a partial boot print, size unknown, but distinct in its deep tread. Forensics labored over it, hoping for a match, but it was a needle in a haystack. As autumn bled into November, A second disappearance rocked the city. Mark Thompson, a 35-year-old software engineer, vanished from his upscale Pearl District condo. Mark was a creature of habit, a man whose life revolved around his work, his gym, and his meticulously kept routines. His disappearance was noted by his colleagues when he failed to show up for a crucial meeting. Like Sarah, his car remained parked in his building's garage, and his phone went straight to voicemail. Corbin felt a sickening lurch in his stomach. The similarities were too striking to ignore. Two seemingly unrelated individuals, from different walks of life, both vanishing without a trace. Their vehicles left behind, their phones silenced. The MO was beginning to take shape, a terrifying pattern emerging from the shadows. Mark Thompson's body was found 2 weeks later, not in the dense forest, but in an abandoned warehouse on the industrial fringes of North Portland. The location was equally remote, equally desolate, yet a stark departure from the previous crime scene. This time, the killer hadn't bothered with a burial. Mark's body was discovered by urban explorers, his hands bound, a single gunshot wound mirroring Sarah's. Again, no signs of struggle, no sexual assault. The chilling precision was undeniably present. The warehouse, a cavernous space filled with dust and debris, offered a few more clues than the forest. A faint, almost imperceptible scuff mark on the concrete floor, consistent with the same boot print found at Sarah's burial site. And, crucially, a single spent shell casing, a .22 caliber, meticulously wiped clean of fingerprints. This was the first tangible piece of evidence linking the two cases. The city was gripped by terror. The news headlines shrieked, speculating about a serial killer, a monster lurking in their midst. The police, under immense public pressure, held press conferences, assuring the public that they were dedicating every resource to the case. But their words felt hollow against the escalating fear. The killer, dubbed the Autumn Shadow by the local press, was a phantom, leaving behind only death and unanswered questions. Corbin found himself working around the clock, fueled by strong coffee and a growing sense of urgency. He was a meticulous detective, believing in the power of patterns, of connecting the seemingly disparate dots. He studied the victims' lives, searching for any common thread. Sarah, the artistic free spirit, Mark, the structured tech professional. They seemed to have nothing in common, no shared acquaintances, no overlapping social circles. The randomness of the targets was as unsettling as the method of killing. As December approached, the air grew colder, and so did the city's mood. Christmas lights twinkled with a forced cheerfulness, overshadowed by the pervasive fear. People avoided walking alone at night. Neighborhoods that were once vibrant after dusk now felt deserted. The sense of community had fractured, replaced by an isolating paranoia. Corbin, sitting in his cluttered office late one night, surrounded by overflowing case files and maps dotted with the grim locations, felt a gnawing frustration. They had a killer, a deadly, efficient predator, but absolutely no idea who he was or why he was doing this. The meticulousness suggested intelligence. The choice of locations suggested an intimate knowledge of the Portland area, both its hidden nooks and its more public spaces. He looked at the two victim photos. Sarah's radiant smile, Mark's serious, thoughtful gaze. Two lives extinguished, leaving behind a trail of grief and terror. He traced the boot print on a blown-up photo, a silent challenge from the killer. The .22 caliber bullet, a common and easily obtainable round, offered little in the way of distinctiveness. The Autumn Shadow. The name felt disturbingly APT. A presence unseen, unheard, striking from the periphery, leaving only the chilling echoes of its passing. Corbin knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that this was just the beginning. The killer was growing bolder, perhaps even enjoying the chaos he was sowing. And until they understood the motive, until they found the link that connected these seemingly random victims, the Autumn Shadow would continue to hunt, casting its long, terrifying shade over the city of Portland. The first act of this macabre drama had just concluded, leaving a terrified audience and a detective grappling with an antagonist he couldn't yet see, but whose presence was acutely felt. The echoes of autumn were not just the rustling of leaves. They were the whispers of fear, the prelude to a storm. The winter of 2008 brought not only snow and biting winds but a chilling escalation in the autumn shadow's reign of terror. The city of Portland, already on edge, hunkered down, gripped by a fear that had become a constant, unwelcome companion. Detective Miles Corbin, along with the newly assembled multi-agency task force, found themselves in a desperate race against an increasingly brazen and enigmatic killer. The public demanded answers, and the pressure on Corbin was immense, a heavy cloak he wore with grim determination. The third victim, Eleanor Vance, a 72-year-old retired librarian, disappeared in early January. Eleanor was known for her daily walks through her charming Victorian neighborhood of Irvington, a familiar figure with a quick smile and a kind word for everyone. Her absence was noticed almost immediately by her tight-knit community when her beloved golden retriever, Buster, was found wandering alone and disoriented, several blocks from her home. Eleanor, a creature of strict routine, never left Buster unattended. Corbin felt a fresh wave of despair. An elderly woman, a senior citizen. The pattern of victims was becoming even more perplexing. Sarah, the young art student, Mark, the successful tech engineer, and now Eleanor, the gentle librarian. Their lives intersected at no discernible point, their demographics wildly disparate. This wasn't a killer targeting a specific group. This was something far more insidious, far more random, or perhaps far more symbolic in a way they hadn't yet grasped. Eleanor's body was discovered a week later, meticulously arranged in an abandoned hydroelectric plant along the Willamette River. The location was remote, accessible only by a single, overgrown dirt road, another testament to the killer's intimate knowledge of the area's hidden, derelict spaces. The scene was horrifyingly familiar. A single .22 caliber gunshot to the head, no signs of struggle, and an eerie, almost respectful presentation of the body. The now infamous boot print was present again, a ghostly calling card in the dust. This time, however, the killer left something new. Tucked neatly beneath Eleanor's left hand was a single, freshly pressed, white lily. It was an unsettling addition, a macabre flourish that spoke of ritual, of a twisted sense of artistry. The lily, a flower often associated with funerals and purity, added a layer of disturbing complexity to the autumn shadow's motive. It felt like a message, a cryptic clue meant to be discovered. The lily sent the task force into a frenzy. Was it a signature? A taunt? Dr. Evelyn Reed, a renowned criminal psychologist brought in to consult on the case, theorized it could be a psychological manifestation, a way for the killer to assert control, or even a warped attempt at cleansing or honoring the victims. It suggests a highly intelligent individual, she explained to a room of grim-faced detectives. Someone who isn't just killing, but creating a narrative, a performance. The media, by now in a perpetual state of hysteria, dubbed the killer the Lily Killer in addition to the Autumn Shadow. The public panic intensified, giving way to an almost collective paranoia. People began to see lilies everywhere, symbols of dread rather than beauty. Sales of personal alarms skyrocketed, self-defense classes were overbooked, and the city's vibrant nightlife withered. Corbin felt the weight of it all. He was haunted by the faces of the victims, by the unanswered questions that gnawed at him day and night. The task force was drowning in leads, thousands of tips pouring in, most of them useless. They were chasing shadows, sifting through an ocean of information, desperate for a tangible thread. The forensics team, however, was making progress, albeit slowly. The .22 caliber casings, while common, offered subtle rifling marks unique to the specific firearm. They knew the killer was using the same gun. The boot prints, while still unidentifiable to a specific brand, were now known to be from a size 10 men's boot, with a distinctive hexagonal lug pattern. They were building a profile piece by agonizing piece. Dr. Reed's insights were proving invaluable. She painted a picture of a killer who was likely male, highly intelligent, meticulous, and suffering from a profound psychological disturbance. He enjoys the control, she explained, the elaborate planning, the ritualistic elements. The random selection of victims is likely a misdirection, a way to conceal a deeper, unknown connection or symbolic meaning known only to him. She also warned them that the addition of the lily suggested an escalation, a killer who was growing more confident, more deeply entrenched in his dark fantasy. The fourth victim, a month later in February, confirmed Dr. Reed's chilling prediction. David Chun, a 28-year-old barista at a popular downtown coffee shop, vanished after his late-night shift. David was a well-liked, aspiring musician, known for his friendly demeanor and his captivating guitar playing. His absence left a gaping hole in his tight-knit group of friends and fellow artists. David's body was found in a remote, unused section of the Oregon Zoo's parking lot, a place that, during the day, teemed with families and laughter. The macabre irony was not lost on Corbin. The killer was choosing locations that were either entirely isolated or, in the case of the zoo, held a twisted, almost mocking juxtaposition to the horror within. The MO was identical. Single .22 caliber gunshot, no struggle, and another pristine white lily. This time, however, the lily was placed not under his hand, but meticulously tucked into the strings of his beloved guitar, which lay carefully beside him. The placement of the lily felt like a direct taunt to the police, a deliberate escalation of the killer's sick game. The message was clear: I am watching. I am in control. The guitar, a symbol of David's passion and identity, made the act even more personal, more devastating. The city exploded. Protests erupted, demanding action. The mayor's office was flooded with calls. News crews from across the country descended on Portland, transforming the story into a national phenomenon. The Autumn Shadow was no longer just a local terror. He was a symbol of vulnerability, a chilling embodiment of the darkness that could lurk in any seemingly safe community. Corbin felt the frustration building into a burning rage. They had the gun, they had the boot prints, they had a psychological profile, but they still had no suspect. No face, no name. It was as if the killer was a ghost, slipping through their fingers like smoke. The task force pulled out all the stops. Surveillance cameras across the city were painstakingly reviewed, hours of grainy footage poured over. Thousands of individuals were interviewed, their alibis scrutinized. The forensics lab was working overtime trying to extract any microscopic fiber, any speck of dust that might link to the killer. One night, exhausted and defeated, Corbin was reviewing old files, rereading every detail of the first two cases. He looked at Sarah's photo, then Mark's. He then spread out photos of Eleanor and David. Their lives, their stories, their dreams all extinguished by the same unseen hand. He found himself fixating on the random nature of the victims. It was too random. There had to be something. He called Dr. Reed, late as it was. "Evelyn," he said, his voice raspy with fatigue. "You said the randomness could be a misdirection. What if it's not random at all? What if the connection isn't in their lives, but in their deaths?" Dr. Reed was silent for a moment. "That's an interesting thought, Miles." "How so?" "The lily. The placement. It's a ritual. What if the victims are chosen not for who they are, but for what they represent? A symbolic sacrifice, perhaps." Reed considered this. "It's a possibility, Miles. A highly complex and deeply disturbed one, but a possibility. If so, what do these four individuals symbolize to our killer? What narrative is he building?" Corbin stared at the photos, a fresh surge of adrenaline coursing through him. Sarah, the art student, representing creativity, youth. Mark, the engineer, representing logic, order. Eleanor, the librarian, representing knowledge, wisdom. David, the musician, representing passion, expression. He felt a chill, not from the cold outside, but from the horrifying realization that began to dawn on him. Creativity, logic, knowledge, passion. These were not just professions. They were fundamental aspects of the human experience, pillars of civilization, elements of the soul. "He's not killing people, Evelyn," Corbin whispered, his voice barely audible. "He's killing ideas, concepts. He's systematically dismantling something, piece by piece, representing it through his victims." Dr. Reed's voice was hushed, almost awed. "My God, Miles. If that's true, then we're dealing with a killer whose delusion is profound, whose motive is deeply symbolic. He's not just a serial killer, he's an ideological one. And that, Miles, makes him far more dangerous, far more unpredictable. The realization, while terrifying, offered a glimmer of a new path. If the victims were symbolic, then the killer was likely trying to communicate a message, a twisted philosophical statement. This wasn't just about catching a killer. It was about deciphering a deeply deranged mind. Corbin stared at the map again, no longer just seeing crime scenes, but seeing points on a disturbed canvas. The remote forest, the industrial warehouse, the abandoned power plant, the zoo parking lot. Each location, carefully chosen, was a stage for his dark performance. As winter began its slow retreat, the dread in Portland solidified. The autumn shadow was no longer just a killer. He was a dark poet, a macabre philosopher, weaving a terrifying narrative with the lives he extinguished. The second act of this chilling drama had escalated, revealing a killer far more intelligent and deeply disturbed than anyone had initially imagined. The gyre was widening, and the city, caught in its deadly current, could only watch and wait for the next horrifying revelation. Spring of 2008 brought a deceptive calm to Portland. The fear remained, a low, constant hum beneath the surface, but the immediate panic had subsided into a grim resignation. The autumn shadow, or the ideological killer, as Dr. Reed had privately dubbed him, had been silent for 2 months. This lull, however, was not a sign of the killer ceasing his activities, but rather a chilling period of regrouping, of planning his next, even more audacious move. Detective Miles Corbin knew this silence was merely the drawn breath before another scream. Corbin's team, now working under the heavy weight of the symbolic victim theory, felt a renewed sense of purpose, albeit a terrifying one. They were no longer just looking for a common thread in the victims' lives, but for the philosophical statement the killer was trying to make. The pressure mounted from the public and federal agencies, demanding a breakthrough. The White House had even called, offering resources, highlighting the national impact of the case. The breakthrough, when it came, was not through forensics or eyewitness accounts, but through painstaking, almost obsessive analysis of the killer's chosen locations. Corbin, with his maps spread across the entire wall of his office, noticed a pattern beyond their geographical randomness. The forest, a symbol of raw nature. The warehouse, industrial decay. The power plant, abandoned technology. The zoo parking lot, a place where wildness was contained, but nearby. He called Dr. Reed in again. Evelyn, the locations. They're not just remote. They seem to be chosen for what they represent in conflict with humanity, or nature, or progress. Reed's eyes widened. My God, Miles, you're seeing it. Nature, industry, power, the wild contained. These aren't just places. They're elements of a crumbling civilization, or perhaps a reflection of the killer's own internal conflict. The fifth victim emerged in late April, shattering the fragile peace. Dr. Eris Thorne, a 50-year-old renowned philosopher and professor at Reed College, disappeared from his home in southeast Portland. Thorne was a solitary intellectual, known for his controversial theories on societal decline and the inherent flaws of modern civilization. His disappearance was reported by a colleague when Thorne missed a scheduled lecture. Corbin felt a cold wave wash over him. A philosopher. This was no longer subtle symbolism. This was a blatant, almost theatrical statement. Dr. Thorne was not just a victim. He was a direct representation of the very ideas Corbin and Reed were now theorizing about. The killer was showing his hand, making his motive undeniably clear. Dr. Thorne's body was found 2 days later, not in a remote location, but in a prominent, symbolic one. The grand, echoing rotunda of the historic Multnomah County Central Library. The library, a beacon of knowledge and public access, was a sacrilege, a deliberate desecration. The scene was meticulously staged. Thorne sat upright in a large, antique armchair, a copy of Nietzsche's Thus Spoke Zarathustra open on his lap, its pages marked by a single, pristine white lily. The .22 caliber gunshot wound was, as always, to the back of the head, precise and clinical. The brazenness of the location, a public institution, during off hours was a shocking escalation. It demonstrated a terrifying audacity, a killer who felt untouchable, who was now openly mocking the authorities. The boot prints were there, a final, taunting signature. The library discovery plunged Portland into a state of collective horror. This was no longer just about fear. It was about defiance. The killer had walked into a sacred public space and committed his act under their very noses. The FBI, now fully involved, poured resources into the investigation, and the pressure on Corbin reached unbearable levels. But the bold move also proved to be the killer's undoing. While the library staff had seen nothing suspicious, a homeless man, known for sleeping in the vicinity, had witnessed a vehicle parked oddly near a service entrance in the early hours of the morning. He described a late model, dark-colored sedan, and, crucially, a man with a distinct limp, struggling to carry a large, covered object consistent with Dr. Thorne's body wrapped in a tarp. The limp, it was a detail Corbin had been waiting for. He remembered the slightly uneven depth of the boot prints, something forensic had attributed to soft ground or uneven pressure. But a limp, that made sense. They had a partial plate number from the homeless man, jotted down on a piece of cardboard, surprisingly accurate. The partial plate led them to a registered owner, Arthur Finch, a 58-year-old former history professor, dismissed from Portland State University several years prior for erratic behavior and increasingly antisocial nihilistic rants during lectures. Finch lived in a secluded cabin on the outskirts of Forest Park, a vast natural area bordering the city. He had no criminal record, but his past academic writings and philosophical treatises, once considered provocative, now read like a chilling manifesto. They contained frequent references to societal decay, the corrupting influence of technology, the loss of authentic human experience, and the need for a radical, almost ritualistic, purification of society. Corbin felt a cold certainty. The fit, the intelligence, the meticulousness, the philosophical motive, the intimate knowledge of Portland, the carefully chosen locations. Finch, a dismissed academic, stewing in his own bitter philosophies, had become the embodiment of the autumn shadow. The arrest was swift and tactical. A SWAT team, accompanied by Corbin and his detectives, raided Finch's cabin at dawn. Finch offered no resistance, found meticulously cleaning a .22 caliber pistol on his workbench. Beside him, a stack of freshly pressed white lilies and a detailed handwritten journal. The journal was a chilling revelation. It chronicled Finch's descent into madness, his elaborate planning, his justification for each murder. Sarah Jenkins represented the superficiality of modern art, Mark Thompson the soullessness of technology, Eleanor Vance the outdated wisdom of institutions, David Chun the frivolousness of entertainment, and Dr. Eris Thorne the failure of philosophy itself. He saw himself not as a killer, but as an architect of a necessary, symbolic cleansing, a protest against a world he believed had lost its way. He even detailed how he acquired the specific type of lily, a rare hybrid he cultivated himself, another chilling detail of his meticulous nature. The trial of Arthur Finch dominated national headlines for months. The psychological profile, his meticulously documented motives, the chilling precision of his crimes all painted a portrait of a highly intelligent, deeply disturbed individual who had rationalized horrific acts through a warped philosophical lens. Dr. Reed's testimony was crucial, explaining the profound delusions that drove Finch. Finch, however, remained unrepentant. In court, he delivered rambling, impassioned speeches about the decay of society, portraying himself as a visionary, a necessary evil, rather than a murderer. He claimed his victims were sacrifices, symbols in his grand, dark narrative. His cold, unwavering gaze unsettled everyone in the courtroom, a stark reminder of the depth of his delusion. Despite Finch's attempts to justify his actions, the evidence was overwhelming. The ballistic matches, the boot prints, the detailed journal, and the testimony of the homeless man, it was an open and shut case. Arthur Finch was convicted on all counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to multiple life terms without the possibility of parole. The verdict brought a collective sigh of relief to Portland, but true healing would take years, if ever. The autumn shadow had been unmasked. His reign of terror ended, but the scars he left on the city, and on the minds of its inhabitants, were deep and lasting. The sense of security, once taken for granted, was irrevocably shattered. Detective Miles Corbin, physically and emotionally drained, found himself standing by the Willamette River, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. The wind carried the faint scent of lilies from a nearby garden, a scent that would forever be tinged with dread for him. He had caught the killer, but the cost had been immense. He had seen the darkest corners of the human mind, witnessed the fragility of life, and the insidious way fear could permeate a community. The story of the autumn shadow became a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder that evil can wear many faces, sometimes even the face of a disgruntled academic with a warped sense of purpose. It was a testament to the power of methodical detective work, but also a somber reflection on the enduring mysteries of human psychology. Years later, Portland slowly began to reclaim its sense of peace. The doors were locked a little tighter, strangers were eyed with a little more caution, but the vibrant spirit of the city endured. Yet, on crisp autumn evenings, when the leaves rustled and the shadows lengthened, a faint echo of the terror remained, a whispered memory of the time when a lone man, driven by a dark philosophy, had cast his long, chilling shadow over the city, leaving behind a trail of lilies and despair, forever etching the name Arthur Finch, the Autumn Shadow, into the annals of American crime. The final act of this chilling drama concluded not with triumph, but with a profound and lasting introspection into the human capacity for darkness.